Now, without further delay, let's begin today's event, again sponsored by Onfido and hosted by Credit Union Journal. I'd like to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Mike Sisk. Mike, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Marvin, and I would like to welcome the audience once again. We are very grateful that you've chosen to share some of your busy day with us. We know that your time is valuable, and we will honor that today with what I'm confident will be an engaging 60 minutes or so of discussion. Once again, our topic today is, what does member-centricity mean in a post-COVID world? And my name is Mike Sisk. I will be your moderator today. I'm a contributing editor at American Banker, and my articles have also appeared in Barron's, Crane's New York Business, Inc., Institutional Investor, Strategy and Business, and Worth. And I am very, very pleased to introduce our two speakers today. Alfy Louis, Financial Services Advisor at Onfido. Alfy is an accomplished senior executive and board member with more than 25 years of experience across the financial services, banking, and technology industries. Throughout his career, Alfy has held various leadership positions, including Managing Director at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Founder and CEO of the Bank Cloud, Executive Vice President of Sales, Alliances, Services, and Product Development at D&H, and Global Advisor in Sales Strategy and Business Intelligence at VMware. And we are really very pleased to have Alfy with us today. And joining him is Ed Ackerman. Ed currently serves as Director of Alliances and Partnerships at Onfido. He joined the company in 2016 as Head of Client Management and has been instrumental in driving the company's commercial strategy and record revenue growth. Prior to Onfido, Ed led a high-performing team as Head of UK Channel Partnerships at Google, and he started his career as a management consultant at Deloitte. And we're also really pleased to have Ed with us here today as well. And just before we jump into things, I wanted to reiterate one quick thing that Marvin mentioned, and that is we do have time at the end for Q&A. Usually we set aside 10 or 15 minutes. You don't have to wait until the end to put your question to the queue. You can do that throughout the hour as it occurs to you, and we encourage you to do that. We will make every effort to get to all questions. Sometimes we don't get to everyone's questions. Sometimes it's a matter of that we've just run out of time. Sometimes it's a question that's better answered one-on-one after the program. But for whatever reason, if we don't get to the question you've asked, we will definitely follow up afterward. So your voice will be heard. We really, really want to hear from you, so please ask away. And I think with that, I'm done with a little opening spiel here. I would like to officially turn things over to Alfy to really get the ball rolling here. Alfy, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here. We promise you meaningful conversation. We'll try to make it to the point. Please ask your questions. Happy to take questions at the end. Also, please connect with me later on if you have deeper conversation. We're really genuinely happy to drive further conversations. So today, we really don't want to talk about COVID or the pandemic in general, but we wanted to talk about what's after the pandemic. How do we really change the customer experience to our advantage? In my humble opinion, I believe this is what's called the Great Reset, right? We have a great opportunity to reshape the business of banking. We have a narrow window of opportunity to reimagine how we serve our members and our customers. Clearly, customer interaction is no longer business as usual. Like we all know that 80-some% of the people are not willing to go interact in person anymore. As a matter of fact, IBM published something last Thursday that suggests most of banking customers, 87% of customers, whether it's a bank or a credit union, do not want to have the in-person banking anymore, at least for now. And we all know that many experts have predicted that this new model is here to stay for a long time. We've seen other industries changing how they interact or how they provide different experiences. So again, the digital world is no longer a feature, right? We all know that we wanted to do digital. It's not just a feature; it is the new business. Ed.
Thank you, Alfy. That's right. And in lockdown, as Alfy said, sometimes the only way to get things done is by going online. For some outfits like Amazon, Zoom, web-only financial services firms, this has been a massive boost. But for other businesses, it's a time of reflection. For instance, for credit unions, can my members and customers do what they need to do on my digital storefronts? And if not, what do they do instead? Where do they go? For me personally, I've been really, really happy with the ability to trade stocks with a few clicks on my mobile. So just last Monday, as it were, and perhaps somewhat unwisely, I figured now was the time to dive in and buy Apple stock just before the split. I have a Revolut account, which is a mobile-only bank account that increasingly lets you do lots more like loans and obviously stock trading. Revolut's partnership with Drive Wealth, which is a retail investment platform for beginners like me, meant I could complete that process of signing up to trade safely and securely, all from the comfort of my own desk at home within the space of about 5 minutes. And those are the types of experiences that prove some things are better online and can be more magical in some ways online, particularly, as Alfy said, as we can't get into branches right now. Alfy, well, speaking about branches, maybe you could take it from here.
Sure. So I'm not here to bash the branch or to undermine the value of the branch. Clearly, the branch offered, serious and significant value to the banking industry, and it will continue to provide that value in different ways. So it served the industry well. It deepened the relationships, established the trust, served the members and customers in various capacities. Obviously at a cost. I mean, the cost to serve for the most part is between 35 and 40% of the cost envelope in a bank goes to the bank. In a world where we lost that traffic or we have less traffic, in a world where consumer habits are changing, in a world where folks could do much on a phone, you could argue the new world is exposing the challenges and limitations of the branch. So you could argue that the velocity of growth is going to be challenged if you depend on the branch. The physical and geographical boundaries of the branch are also going to limit your growth. You could argue the capacity to scale in a world that is going virtual is also going to hinder the growth. The cost justification, if you wish, the 35-40% cost envelope is no longer going to be feasible options for a bank to do so. So I humbly believe that this pandemic is exposing the branch limitation. And I would actually say, start to ask questions, how do you grow? How do you maintain and sustain your customer satisfaction? How do you expand your product portfolio? How do you continue to serve and enhance the experience that you've been used to if customers don't come to your branch? You still have a cost envelope to face and meet. You have to maintain cost, and you have to compete. You have to deal with the legacy world, and you continue to reduce risk. So you have quite a few questions that needed to be answered in the digital world. And in the beginning of it all, how do you establish trust? Folks in the past walked to the branch, they trusted you and trusted them. You verified who they are, they verified who you are. We all feel good about the interaction. So in the new world, the question to ask is, how do you establish that trust? How do you build that trust mechanism for you to get a grasp of who the customer is? And how do you interact with that customer moving forward? So the answer really is, how do you build that customer-centric model? The answer is about customer centricity versus product centricity versus physical place centricity. How do you build an end-to-end system that evolves around the customer or the member, whether they are current customers or new customers? How do you build that new model that establishes the trust at the minute or at the moment you interact with your new customer? So that's where Onfido comes in. I'll pass it also to Ed to talk a bit about, what is that member-centric model should look like.
Thank you, Alfy. And yeah, so perhaps unsurprisingly at this stage, we would argue that to be member-centric is to be digital. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through. And one thing that we were discussing beforehand is often when you talk about going digital or digital transformation, it's met with dread, right? It sounds endless, it sounds expensive, it sounds difficult ultimately. Our contention is that this isn't about ripping out and replacing your entire organization, your systems, your operating models, your processes per se. What we believe is that you can start small and still drive a disproportionate impact as long as you prioritize. And prioritizing is really, really key here. That means thinking about, as Alfy said, the member's experience first, even just those member journeys that matter most to them or that matter most to you perhaps. How do you delight members in a digital world? What sort of magical experiences can you do rather than just recreating a branch experience? How can you do something that's new, that's beautiful, and that hasn't been experienced before by those members who've so far perhaps never touched your digital storefront? I wouldn't dream of going into a branch to buy stocks or even opening a savings account. My default today is digital based on those experiences that I've had recently and historically. But what are those kind of high volume member needs that could be better met online? And how could you maybe change your branch interactions to put the power of in-person experiences to best effect and make sure those workers in branch are doing really, really high value tasks rather than perhaps some of the high volume pieces that could be dealt with much, much more positively online. And so Alfy touched on this in terms of our customer centricity at Onfido. Maybe Alfy, if you want to carry on with what it means for us.
Sure. Thanks, Ed. So, as I said earlier, digital is about trust, but also it's about real time as well. So, again, in the branch, we walked to the branch and we established the trust, and the relationship started real time, right? They verified I am who I am or I claim to be. They started the paperwork. They got my data. They entered in the system. So everything really happened in real time. How can you do that in a digital world? How do you prove that I am who I am just based on some sort of an ID or some sort of a login? So there has to be a different mechanism where when we go into the digital world, the institution needs to verify I am who I am so they can build that trust. So at the point of account opening or at the point of customer acquisition, there has to be a mechanism to validate and verify I am who I am, mapping my digital identity with my physical identity, ensuring that I am real. So it's about being real, it's about being real time, it's about trust, it's about, capitalizing on the technology to replace what was happening in the branch. As Ed was saying, that you don't have to replace the whole systems and the whole tools, and you don't have to rip and replace your procedures and processes. The argument here is you can extend your system. You can change your procedures and protocol or adapt different protocols to use the technologies that we provide here in Onfido. So clearly our technology here is really about mapping our digital identities with our government ID. We're going to show you in a bit that we can, with technology, verify that I am who I am using my driver's license or passport and ensure that my selfie is actually my selfie. It's not an image of me. It's not a photocopy of an image of me. When we map them together, we can take the data out of that interaction and we dump it into the system or integrate it into the system so I can use this digital identity that is verified and proven and start to extend the systems, whether I am opening an account or giving you consent to check my credit or multi-use cases that we're going to talk about shortly, but fundamentally marrying my digital identity with my physical identity and bonding them together and creating what we know and call real digital identity that could be leveraged across these systems. So I will pass it a bit. I would like to talk a bit about the, what you call the scenarios, or I want to put you in an innovation mode or an imagine mode. So if you can imagine that I can extend your legacy systems, whether it's a core banking system or decisioning system or payment system or lending system, to be digitally ready. In other words, how I can use this digital identity that is proven, that has been real, that has been validated, that has been married with my physical identity to open a bank account or to give you consent to make a decision, get some data on me, whether it's a credit report or otherwise. How do you take payments and accept payments and transfer payments? How do you issue loans and mortgages? So the Imagine journey really is about leveraging this identity in the hundreds of procedures and hundreds of processes throughout the systems to ensure that those transactions are conducted visually. So I'll take you through a scenario of mortgage. I have had experiences with mortgages and loans in my previous life. Granted, people need to read documents, people need to fill applications, people need to sign consents, sign disclosures, discuss interest rates and payment plans and schedules, and documents need to be passed along. And that exercise has been done for the most part manually, right? I have to be physically available to do so. But could you imagine the saving, the energy that is being consumed in that exercise to be done digitally? Could you imagine the amount of paper that would be reduced? Could you imagine the speed and the accuracy of conducting business digitally when you really know you're dealing with whoever you're dealing with? I also imagine the operating efficiencies, right? Imagine the automation that you can get. Some data points, some of the customers that we're working with, I had a conversation with last week that suggests that automation alone, one single process that was automated, saved them about 44% of the cost, let alone the time, let alone the energy, let alone the accuracy, let alone the fraud detection that came along with that exercise. So the notion of operating efficiencies when you know who you're dealing with in a much better way, in a much more efficient fashion than what you do via the face-to-face interaction. The cost associated with the exercise physically versus digitally. The speed of, ensuring that you're dealing with the right person. The simplicity, the accuracy. So you could argue that when you move to digital, you achieve significant operating efficiencies. Some data suggests, I was reading some report came out of McKinsey the other day, that automation has a potential of saving about 48% of the time. And if you multiply that time by money, you could argue there's a lot of money to be saved. But the accuracy as well is being addressed. Also in the journey of, the regulatory compliance, we all know that we're a heavily regulated industry, and, you gotta know your customer. You gotta know who you're dealing with. You gotta report data in the right spot. You gotta audit this data. You gotta integrate certain systems and reporting certain systems. We've done very well with quite a few hundred customers. I want to say 1,500 customers. We've done this KYC compliance very well, and we certainly could share with you a lot of data as to how efficiently we do this, integrating with systems of record, integrating with systems of intelligence, but also ensuring that the experience that you and I go through when we prove or where we provide our KYC data is being kept and being transacted properly. I also wanted to conclude that the use cases could go on and on and on. We've identified about 30-some use cases where you can use real identity to serve you and your customers and your members more efficiently. So I'm going to stop here and pass it to Ed to talk to you about how we do it, and then we come back and talk about vision and how we interact. Ed?
Thank you, Alfy. That's right. And we'll also touch a little bit later in this piece on some of the business results we've achieved with customers meeting just those types of use cases that Alfy alluded to previously. So the how does Onfido check someone's real identity? I'll take you through in a few slides some of the front-end stuff, what you see as a user or a member, and then behind the curtain, what we're seeing on our side of the journey and how we are managing to turn around a check within seconds to a high degree of accuracy and a high degree of completion rate. So, starting with the what, this is what you would see if you were a member logging on to a credit union that had already embedded Onfido's technology in their app experience. To anchor a user to a real identity, we do two things. First, we guide her to capture a government-issued photo ID. Then she snaps a photo or video of herself. And that's it. The user enjoys very much a simple, quick experience to prove her identity, often within the flow of a wider sign-up journey. And it really is that beautiful in its simplicity. It's two things that we're looking for and typically takes seconds or tens of seconds to get there. It's worth saying why there two, why not one? What about the document? The document alone won't assure you that the person presenting it is the same person, that rightful owner of the document. It gives you their legal identity, and we can pull from that document many different elements of that user's identity, but we don't know that the person presenting it is the rightful owner. And fraudsters are good at getting hold of genuine documents. It's much harder to get the document owner to agree to its use for fraudulent purposes, as you can imagine. That's where the selfie or video capture complements our approach. Now we can both verify that the user's document is genuine, something that the user has, but also that it was presented by the same person, the person who's signing up for your services, and something that the user is. Okay, that's two factors of authentication and gives us a high degree of assurance that the user is who they say they are. So as we don't have audio for the next piece, I'm not going to be able to do this as a poll as such, but I wanted to just get your eyes on this slide, albeit maybe quite small on your screens. This is the back end. This is very much step 2 of Onfido. And this is the artificial intelligence that we apply to make our models work. The user has submitted her document and face. We need to verify that the document at first is genuine, and then that the face matches the document face. Should be simple, but what I'm asking you here is to think through and look at these different documents one by one and think which one of these is fake. You'll be grading yourselves, as I say, to keep your answers in mind. I'm going to transition to the answers now. Did you get it? I can honestly say I didn't when I first looked at this slide. So all but the top left image here are fake. And we have tweaked these ourselves, sometimes subtly, sometimes more overtly, to create, let's say, an image about how tricky it can be to spot fraud. And this isn't even particularly sophisticated fraud. And indeed, our surveys sort of suggest, in terms of the data we receive, most of the fraud we get we wouldn't characterize as highly sophisticated, but it can be enough to trick an untrained eye, and is often enough to trick even the eyes of very well-trained clerks who are checking people's documents when they pass through border control. even in those instances, up to 14% of times, is there an error in the match between the person and their document. So this really isn't easy, okay? And so what we're doing with the technology that we built is trying to keep up with the fraudsters who really make it their living to do this. And by the way, it really is a 9-to-5 job. We've positioned some stats on this from a survey we ran last year, and we see a much higher incidence of fraud during the hours of 9 to 5. They obviously take the weekends off like the rest of us, which is nice. So what are we actually doing here with this document? What are these other signals that we're looking at? So Onfido is looking at the data on the document, such as the ID number, which should be a certain sequence to match the rest of the data on the document. That's fairly straightforward. If there's a mismatch, we'll flag that. Then you can think about security features, top right. You can think about complex patterns or holograms that feature across documents. These can be tricky, particularly in what is much more a two-dimensional world. We're getting images of these documents. We're not feeling and looking at the physical document itself, which puts us at a disadvantage and means that we have to really up the ante in terms of the assessments that we're making digitally on these documents. Then looking to the bottom left, there are telltale signs someone has physically or digitally edited the face on the document. So this example that we're looking at is one where the face is clearly different from the others. And that's a very common thing for fraudsters to do, to simply change the image and keep everything else as legitimate on the document itself. Of more complexity is thinking about fonts. We work to document manufacturer guidelines. They use specific fonts, often with intentional errors that help us identify fraud. Fraudsters aren't always well trained in those areas. They may disregard them, and those are exactly the types of things that we'll look at to catch them out. And then lastly in this array, pixel tampering. So this is whether a document has been digitally manipulated. Often fraudsters will take pixels from one part of an image and apply them elsewhere. And this is this is the sort of state of document fraud that we receive today. So this is difficult, and it's hard to do manually to a high degree of accuracy, and that's why we use proprietary AI to do the heavy lifting for us. And what I'll do is just show you one example, which I hope you'll be able to see live. This is a sort of GIF, let's say, of one feature that we have, or one algorithm that we layer around video texture analysis. So what we're looking to do here is, when the person's captured their document in the previous position, the next thing they'll be asked to do is capture their facial biometrics. And so what we're looking to do is make sure that that person has filmed themselves live at that moment. And that gives us a much higher degree of confidence that there's no spoofing attempt made, because if you're comfortable capturing your likeness then and there, you're probably not a fraudster. And let's bear in mind, fraudsters make up maybe 1 to 3% of all users, so they're a very small fraction of the overall user base. Some of the tricks that fraudsters might use: pre-recording videos, filming from screens. These are both spoofing attempts, and so we work hard to capture these. What you can see on the top is an example of our, and bottom is an example of our video texture analysis at work. So in the top screen, you see the attempt is genuine. So that is a video that's taken live. We can capture that person's face, frame just the face from that video. And what you'll see from the elements of green in the spoof heat map is that this is, to a high degree of confidence, a genuine attempt. Our machines believe this is genuine. On the bottom row, you can see a video of a screen. Okay, so this is clearly not captured live. This is someone recording on their phone or other device another screen. And so again, we can arrow in on that person's face, and here you see the spoof heat map renders incredibly red, which in this case you won't be surprised to hear is a spoofing attempt by our analysis. So we have this type of analysis and many others that we layer one on top of the other, and this gives us a high degree of accuracy, albeit in a very short time frame. So again, when you're signing up for this as a user, you don't want to wait hours or days to get your account provisioned. You want it in seconds or minutes, and that's exactly what we are working to do, to bring these kinds of results to our customers in a very short space of time and to a very high degree of accuracy. Before I hand back to Alfy to close out, just a few of our customers to talk about. It's worth saying overall that our document verification catches up to 98.7% of all identity fraud attempts. And specifically, diving into some of our customer scenarios and use cases, Barclays is using us to improve its user experience by allowing customers to verify themselves within the bank's app. This means hundreds of thousands more customers are able to avoid a branch visit, particularly during a post-COVID time. As we discussed before, this can be difficult, and create an account from home and often instantly issue themselves with credit as a result of that. We're now working with HSBC to achieve a similar outcome. Also thinking about user experience, we're working with a multinational life insurance firm that saw a huge drop-off rate by deploying knowledge-based authentication. The 68% of their users just stopped the process of unlocking their policy online because they didn't have the right information in their head at the time of asking them what are often very arcane, difficult knowledge-based authentication questions. Now customers can unlock with a doc and selfie, and that's uplifted completion rates by more than 2x. Some of the names that are on this slide, so Bank is a challenger bank here in Europe. They've achieved 5 times more users verified and onboarded. And Money Match, a remittance firm from Malaysia, achieved an $8 saving in cost per verified user. So they were looking much more at the cost reduction outcomes. So some really compelling outcomes that we're able to achieve with our customers. I'll hand you back to Alfy to close out.
Thank you, Ed. Very comprehensive articulation of our value proposition. Before I jump into the company and how we engage, I wanted also to talk about some relevant banks in the U.S., some relevant credit union, mega credit union in Texas. We were talking to about a couple of use cases. We're trying to prove very efficiently here as to what's the outcome that you would expect from onboarding, from initiating loans or originating loans, signing consent, and in some of the cases also password resets. But before I jump there as well, before I jump into the company, I also wanted to talk about the partners that we have been working with. A lot of identity management companies, I'm not going to drop name, but you could imagine all of them are part of our ecosystem. And certainly we were talking and working with financial services technology providers. Just to give you an idea, this is not just a piece and a feature and a function that stands on its own. We are working through the system here to integrate with, all the names that you could recognize in the back end. So a bit about the company, so you feel confident that you can, when you do business with us, we're not just two guys in the garage. We've been around for 7-8 years. It's a London-based company, has offices pretty much around the globe. We have an office here in San Francisco. I'm from San Francisco. We have a significant presence here. We're running 350, maybe 400 now, growing at a speed of 257% growth quarter over quarter. So you could imagine the momentum that we're building. 1,500 customers, give or take, 195 countries we've accept documents and we can verify documents from. We've just raised about $200 million just recently. You could imagine the big guys, Microsoft, Salesforce.com, and the latest round came from TPG. We've been winning awards. We didn't have space on the slide to list them all, so we've been gaining that momentum. But really, genuinely, I say I've been here for a few months, but the amount of innovation and the amount of customer interaction success that we're seeing, I have not seen in my 30-year career, so very exciting to be here. I also wanted to quickly introduce you to how we engage. This is not a comprehensive in any way or shape or form, but I wanted to say that we are not here to just give you a tool and you're on your right, this is not how we operate. We believe that there is a bit of discovery that needs to happen for us to help you get the best out of the digital innovation technology around identity. We would like to spend time with you, if you desire so, to understand, what's your systems of record, what's your system of intelligence, how do you do things, what processes you follow, and we can certainly help you with our point of view as to how you can optimize this. This is free of charge. We're not here to make money out of advisory services. And fundamentally, we will take it once we kind of discover and you discover. We can help you refine the use case. Again, everything is for free. We can define the integration and the test plan. We can move into rolling out and building the right support. So we feel confident that this is not just a tool and SDK and API. We pass it to you and you're on your own. We certainly will make sure that you're deploying it according to best practices. You're capitalizing on our knowledge and on our ecosystem. We will bring the technology partner and the delivery partners that are needed too. However, I can tell you most of the deployments take few days, perhaps a couple of weeks, doesn't take months to deploy. So with that, I am going to stop. Happy to take questions, happy to connect afterwards. I'll stop right here.
Excellent. And as promised, everyone, we got some time for some questions. So if there is something on your mind now, would definitely be the moment to get that question into the queue. Oh, wait, I see some good ones in here already, so let's just jump right in. First one, and I'll just throw this out to Alfy and Ed both. Please just jump in. How can you detect if the photo ID uses fake picture which matches that of the applicant?
Yeah, and Alfy, I'm happy to take this as a follow-on to what I was talking through.
Please do. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, that scenario is a very common scenario that we see. So when you've got those two factors that you're looking to undertake, as I say, the majority of users are genuine and they pass through those two forms of capturing your document and your facial biometrics, no problem. But if I'm a fraudster, I want to work out how I can pass those and pass myself off as a genuine user. And one of those specific scenarios is what your question here identifies, is taking a photo of someone who is a real person, a real fraudster, let's say, and taking their facial biometrics and applying that to a document. And I think we saw it in the fourth image, the sort of first of the second one along, where it's just a different person's face. The way we handle that is to look at both of those checks in isolation. So in the case of the document check, we are looking, first of all, we're understanding what document this is. So we categorize this. This is a US driving license. Is this a UK passport? Then we're extracting information from that document and analyzing that. For example, if there's a machine-readable zone or barcode, we want to make sure we can extract that information and check it against what we see on the document. But then the third thing that we're doing, and the piece which comes into play here around that person's face, is checking really for signs of fraud. And so if you think about the visual authenticity of that document, we're looking at, was that document captured live? Or was it most likely uploaded or captured non-live in such a way that the user could have potentially photoshopped the document and created an image of it? The more likely, we absolutely push our customers to deploy our software development kit, because it encourages and often forces the members to capture their documents and faces live. And this takes out a massive fraud factor where people are creating documents ahead of time and trying to upload those through our system. But when they do, we're also looking for picture face integrity. We want to see that face and that image of that person's face matches the template of the document, that we can see the features of the document overlaying the image of that person's face, Even some very interesting fraud of people just trying to change the eye tone or the complexion very briefly to really minimize how much work has been done to doctor that document. Even those things are telltale signs, and so we would capture those at the visual authenticity check and come back and say picture face integrity is not right. It doesn't look like the user has captured their document at that moment in time. We consider this to be suspected fraud.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Next question for Ed. Are you white labeling an existing document capture solution with another vendor?
Thank you. No, we're very proud to say we absolutely are not. So it's proprietary document capture. When we say document capture, what I'm talking about here with document capture is the verification service that goes with. So what we've just spoken about at length of capturing that document with our software development kit and then verifying that document. And it's the key piece there is getting a good, clean capture of that person's document or that person's facial biometrics, and then verifying them afterwards. And those products are all proprietary to Onfido, and we're very proud about that.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed. All right. Next question. Just taking a look at some good ones in here. Does Onfido request remembering the original document in the system? What sort of effort is required to do that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. Sorry, Alfy, I feel like I'm on a roll now, but I'll take this one too.
Please do. Please do.
So it touches on a really good point here. So what you're doing when you upload an image is you're sharing those first and foremost with the business that has asked for them, and that is the customer of Onfido, and that business is ultimately sharing those images with Onfido to conduct that verification. And so there are a few things going on here. One is the technical aspect of the capturing of that document and having it in the system. That is probably the easiest piece here. We have an application programming interface which is very straightforward for developers to plug into. We have a software development kit which our customers nest into their mobile apps. But the capturing and sending of data to Onfido is very straightforward. But actually, I think what you may be hinting at here is sort of what happens next. And in an era of GDPR in Europe and privacy obligations in California and so on, it's really vital that we don't hang on to data longer than it needs to be held on to. So we allow for our customers to delete their information as soon as they have their results back, and that's a common use case where they have a risk preference which is absolutely against sharing personally identifying information far and wide. And so if you're thinking about it from a privacy perspective, we give you the tools to delete that information from our servers and from our cloud infrastructure, whether you then keep it on your own and store it yourselves, or even delete that at your end, which is often the preference based on the regulation that people are trying to follow. That is totally within your toolkit. And then finally, sort of what sort of effort is required to store the original document in the system. Because we give the tools to our customers to allow for that deletion, it's up to them to call on that deletion when and if they need to. If they don't need to delete it, or in some cases, if they would prefer us to hold on to it so that they can refer back to it should there be an audit at a later stage, that is our default position. And so in terms of the effort required to remember that original document, that's very straightforward. It's worth saying there is one product that we have launched in beta called Known Faces. That is where we can assess an applicant who is coming onto your system, potentially not for the first time. So first of all, I've signed up as Ed Ackerman, my true self, and then I may be coming back with the same facial biometrics, but signing up as Alfy Louis. And in this scenario, we do require the original document to be kept on file, or the original face to be kept on file, Because what we're doing in this service is comparing that person's face against all of the other images we've captured for that customer in the past and trying to identify if we've seen that person before. It could be that for some reason I've used Alfy's name in error. Maybe I've got fat fingers and I've decided to take his name for a walk. But more often than not, that's a sign of fraud. And this is a service that we have put in place to capture just that type of scenario.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed. All right. Alfy, I've got a question for you here. Regulatory requirements as well as credit operating risk management require more friction from some customers than others. Beneficial ownership information for BSA MAL for commercial customers, for example. How do you manage complexity if you have different flows for different types of customers? Or is it simpler for smaller institutions to stay focused on fewer types of customers?
So this is a great question. Let me answer the first part of it, and then we can get to the second part of it with my point of view. I believe that the notion of regulatory requirements has three different challenges. One, you have the rules, right? You have, call it friction-driven rules, but there is this whole rule, and it applies to the size of the asset, the risk values, the risk-weighted decisions that the financial institution need to make. So that, by definition, is out of my control. This is what the government mandates and the bank is willing to accept. And certainly, we could define the procedures to comply with the rules. The second component of this whole discussion is the systems that we need to interact with. So in some cases, you have systems to enable frictionless based on the state of validation and verification authentication, or maybe you have a very sophisticated identity management system that you could reduce friction with, or maybe you are deploying a layer of integration that you could add a system of identity to simplify this exercise. So it depends. So the short answer, it depends on how complex is your environment. But the third component is where we say we need to engage to discuss in a workshop like the notion of procedure/process. How do you build the momentum of identity verification? You argue that I could not bombard my customers with all of these questions and all of these requirements just to get it right. You could argue that we will define a system that takes the least amount of information and you build as you go. So in other words, if I want to open a bank account for an individual or a business, easy verification. But if I want to give him a credit of a few $100,000, I need a lot more information. If I'm going to transfer bigger amount of money, I need a lot more information. So the point here is you build as you go without compromising the security and without compromising the anti-money laundering rules. How we engage is definitely will address that question step by step. And by the way, it doesn't take a genius. It doesn't take multi-weeks to figure out a system. And in my humble opinion, I have seen the complexities, drive business decisions not to do things. In other words, I encourage you to think about the easiest use cases to launch, the simplest use cases to launch, get the hang of it, capitalize on it, get the benefit, and reap the rewards, and then get into the more complex one. And the answer to the second part of the question, it depends. What's your aptitude for taking more risks and more challenges and more systems to integrate and more complexities you add to your operation. So humbly, I would say with the new technology, start small, start fast, capitalize on the system, use the benefits or reap the benefits, introduce new technologies as you need to, one step at a time. This should not be a big operation. This should be a quick fast, impactful, high yield type of technology usage. Hope that answers it.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Alfy. And I think that is actually a really nice note to wrap it up on here. We got about 5 minutes to the top of the hour, and you know, we always try to bring these things in on schedule or even a few minutes ahead of schedule, just being so aware that many folks are rushing off to something else at the very top of the hour. So, so let me first of all thank Alfy and Ed both. A great discussion here. Lots of ground covered. Very interesting stuff. And wanted to thank everyone in the audience also for being here, for asking us great questions. Please keep an eye out. We will be sending you a follow-up email in the next day or two that will have a link to a recording of this event, as well as the slides themselves, so you can review all this great content at your leisure in the future, and we encourage you to do that. And with that, I think I will officially wrap it up. Wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope you'll join us again here very soon. Thanks so much.